Last time on the Skip and Josh podcast.
Next week, best of the year in terms of sports and entertainment. We may have some awards to give out.
Okay, I'm not looking forward to it.
You're not looking forward to it just because of the work you have to do.
Well, because, I can't even tell you what my favorite play of the year is. I don't remember not one play from this year.
You're listening to the Skip and Josh podcast with Skip Sherman and Josh Obadia.
Okay, Skip, today's our final episode of the year, and that means we're going to reveal our best of 2020. Now, under normal circumstances, we would be in the same room recording this episode. But of course, this year, due to the current pandemic, we are not.
How do you describe 2020? I mean, God.
First of all, I have to tell you that anything that happened before March 11th, it's not that I forgot that it happened. It's just that...
It's almost like it doesn't count.
No, it counts. It's just that I feel like it happened last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Actually, I asked Matthew today about a show that came out because I wanted to confirm if I could put it on my list. I'm like, when did this show come out? Was it this year in 2020? He's like, yeah, it was in 2020. But he goes, it was in the spring. I'm like, oh, that's why. Because it was so fresh. It's like I can't even remember. I mean, look, it's funny because we've done how many episodes of doing like our favorite lists? Like it's 20 episodes maybe. I don't know how many we've done.
Something like that, yeah.
15 to 20. And some of those are about sports and some of them are just about stuff we feel like talking about. But I feel like when we talk about sports, which is what we're about to do, it's really like our strength and and really what the show is, supposed to be. So I am kind of happy that we're going to talk about some sports today and not like ice cream and that type of stuff.
Yeah, so anyway, just to like summarize what I was saying earlier, anything that happened before March 11th, it feels like it was last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So I almost forgot about those things. I know that they happened, but anyway, luckily I watched a bunch of these end of year recap shows. And so it refreshed my memory. So now I'm well prepared to do our best of 2020.
Nothing says more, like what I'm about to tell you now, nothing will encapsulate like what you just said in that, like, can you believe that it's like almost 1 year since Kobe Bryant died? Like, it feels like so long ago. It's like you can hardly remember that. It was just at the beginning of 2020. It's really hard to believe.
It is, yes, it is hard to believe. It seems like a long time ago.
Like, those old expressions, there's like those really corny like comedian jokes when they talk about like spending time, like, oh yeah, you ever been to Cleveland? Yeah, I spent a week there one day, like meaning like it's so boring, like that's been a lot of our lives this year in that, we did a lot of the same stuff. We were stuck in our homes. We didn't have a lot of contact with people. We didn't do a lot of exciting things. So it's like the year really stretched on in our minds. 2020 became really long and, there's a few days left. So I'm kind of happy to like look back on it to try to remember. It was fun doing the research for this to remember some interesting stuff that happened this year in sports and in entertainment.
So let's get to the list. Let's get to our winners.
Let's get to the winners. You want me to lead the way in terms of giving the categories? Or
well, actually, I'd like to say the first category.
Go for it.
Only because I want to get it out of the way.
Shoot, okay.
Because it's my least favorite category.
Yeah, what's that?
Ultimate MVP.
Okay, so the Ultimate MVP was designed to say like who is the best athlete of the year, in terms of like all the sports,
Right. So I mean, I went back and I found out who the MVP was for baseball, for hockey, for basketball, for football.
By the way, I had to research who won the MVPs in the National League and the American League in baseball. I had no idea. I didn't know any of the MVPs for any of the leagues. And I saw that Freddie Freeman won the National League MVP, I thought I was looking at a prediction or a wrong article. Like, honestly, I didn't know what I was reading.
So this is part of the reason why this is my least favorite category. I even wrote down, I wrote down all the MVPs. I even wrote down the Heisman Trophy winner. I even wrote down the college basketball. They don't call it most valuable player in college basketball. They call it the Naismith Award. Yeah, I wrote that down as well.
Yeah.
So I've got all of them on my list and I have to pick one now.
Sure, pick one.
Well, the one I'm going to pick is sort of by process of elimination, I don't really know that this one was better than all the other ones.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pick Giannis Antetokounmpo for 2 reasons.
Uh-huh.
1, he did it 2 years in a row.
Correct.
And 2, he elected to sign with the Milwaukee Bucks rather than become a free agent, which is so rare these days.
You're happy about that? You feel like there's finally there's some sense of loyalty and respect restored in sports by him signing. I felt that.
I mean, I wouldn't go as far as what you just said, because there's still a bunch of people who really all they care about is their paycheck.
But at least we know there's someone out there that's gonna be loyal to his team. You know?
And I mean, it's because and I hate to say this, but it's because he's not American.
Well, I think that definitely plays into it. You know, he has a different upbringing than 99% of the other NBA players, and probably 90% of all of his athletes. He's just has a different upbringing, and I'm glad he felt loyal to the Bucks. It's cool. So it's interesting that you said, because I also didn't know who won the MVPs in the different leagues. So and actually I had three players that I wrote down as my honorable mentions that didn't win the MVPs of their leagues, and that's LeBron James, who, even though he didn't win the MVP, he is still the best player in the NBA.
That's true.
Yeah. Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans, who I felt carried his team on his shoulders to the playoffs and almost far into the playoffs, last January. And the trend is continuing in this year. In this year's NFL season, in the 2020 season. And then the other guy who had a good regular season and also carried his team almost to a World Series title is Randy Arozarena of the Tampa Bay Rays. But those are my honorables. My MVP of MVPs is Patrick Mahomes, who won the Super Bowl in, early 2020. Like you said, maybe it's BC, how we, in the year something BC. So maybe BC actually is still apt. It's before COVID.
Right.
So, in, January, or maybe I don't remember if the Super Bowl was in February this year.
It was in February.
Yeah. So anyways, he won the Super Bowl in 2020. And even though his Super Bowl game probably was just a sort of average game for him, the rest of his playoff performances were unreal. And he's continued this trend into the 2020 NFL season, where he's still the best player in the league, or at least the most exciting anyways. So that's my guy, Patrick Mahomes.
That's an excellent pick. I didn't even have him on my list, because when I Googled, MVPs of 2020, he didn't come up in my search, because he didn't win the MVP in 2020. He did win the MVP of the Super Bowl, actually, but he didn't win MVP of the regular season.
That's right.
So I didn't really consider him. Actually, I didn't consider him because he didn't come up in my search.
Right. I know, because when I looked at the searches of who won the MVPs, I didn't like any of those guys. Well, we've talked about it before. The MVP in the league is not necessarily going to the best player, like I just mentioned with LeBron. A lot of it is it's a story. It's what makes a great story, and sometimes that factors into the MVP votings, which isn't always fair. So best team. Who was your team of the year, Josh? I'm going to give you my also rants first. There was a lot of great teams this year. I just mentioned the Kansas City Chiefs, who won the Super Bowl and are still, I think, the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl again. You have the Lakers, who won the NBA championship. You have the Miami Heat, who were this crazy Cinderella story, making it all the way to the finals. You have the Tampa Bay Lightning, who won the Stanley Cup. We talk about hockey often enough on this show, being Canadian, but the Lightning sort of were a little bit under the radar. The whole Stanley Cup playoffs was. And the Tampa Bay Rays, who also were a great story this year, making it all the way to the finals.
Actually, the Tampa Bay Rays were in my honorable mentions a year ago on this show.
Yeah, just for having a great year, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But my team of the year is the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I'm not a Dodger fan. I'm not, don't care about them, but it's actually rooting for the Rays to win the World Series. But the Dodgers came into this year having won, how many division titles have they won in a row? 4 or 5?
More than that, I think.
More than that even, right? And they've been to the World Series. They lost. They couldn't get over the hump. They lost to the Astros, who famously, some will say, cheated their way to the World Series championship a few years ago. So the Dodgers came into this past season in a kind of very precarious position in that they only had one thing they could do, and that was win the World Series, right? Like anything else will be a failure. Most teams could be happy if they make it to the playoffs, if they improve on their win totals, if they, win a playoff round. But the Dodgers only had one thing, and that was to win it all. And they ran through, destroying the league in the regular season. Their record was ridiculous. And then they did exactly what they had to do by winning the World Series. So my hat's off to them.
0-2 to Adames. And that'll do it! The Los Angeles Dodgers have put their postseason demons to bed. They will hoist the Commissioner's Trophy for the first time since 1988. And yes, the team that was the best in baseball during the regular season has won the World Series.
Well, I did a similar thing that you did. I did some research, I did some Googling, and I found out all the teams that won championships, although I didn't really have to Google that. I knew who the teams were. And as I'm looking at my list, I'm saying to myself, I don't think I watched any of the Stanley Cup finals, and I don't think I watched any of the NBA finals. Right. So those two sports were really not on my radar. And I did watch the Super Bowl, but that was such a long time ago. And I did watch the World Series. And the World Series was actually somewhat interesting, I will say.
It was good. It was really good.
But actually, so none of those teams are my team of the year. None of them.
Wow.
I ended up with 2, and it's a tie. Like, I really cannot break the tie for these 2 teams. So it doesn't really matter which one I say first because it's a tie for first place. So one of them is the Canadian national women's basketball team, which qualified for the Olympics and, by the way, are currently ranked 4th in the world.
Big pick there, Josh. I like that.
Yes. The other one is the Canadian national women's soccer team, which also qualified for the Olympics and, by the way, are currently ranked 8th in the world.
And that's it! Tokyo 2020, here comes Canada!
Look at you going with the female sports.
Well, I mean, to be honest, both of those teams had better years than any other team I could think of. I mean, we're not talking about individual sports now, we're talking about team sports.
Yeah.
And so, as I said to you seconds ago, all those other championships really didn't register on my radar, and these were 2 big accomplishments. Now, both of them would have actually played in the Olympics this year had the Olympics happened. They'll have to wait a year to actually compete in the Olympics, but those were 2 big accomplishments by 2 teams, and I think they both happened actually on the same week in February, where they both qualified in the same week.
Nice. Good one, Josh. I like it. Good thinking out of the box.
So let's go to best game of the year. Actually, it's not best game, it's favorite game, right? So I always have trouble with these categories. I ask you the same question every year. Is it supposed to be something that was like important or just something that I happen to like? And
it's very subjective. It's how you feel about it. I mean, I usually pick something that has more importance, right? Because there are some great games that could have been like a 10-9 NHL game in the regular season. Maybe some will say that was the best game of the year, but there's a lot of things that go into it, right?
The 4th one is the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is often not a good game, but this past year where the Chiefs beat the Niners was actually a good game because the Chiefs had to come from behind, which they seem to do all the time, but it made it interesting. Like when the 4th quarter started, you didn't know who was going to win the game yet.
Right.
So that's number 4 on my list.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3 on my list was a few weeks prior to that. It was the NFL wildcard weekend where Tennessee defeated New England 20-13.
Yeah,
Not really an exciting game, but I loved it because it finally meant that I could rest easy and I knew that New England was not going to play in the Super Bowl yet again.
I believe you came on the podcast that week and exclaimed how happy you were that the Patriots had lost.
That's number 2. Number 3 on my list is actually Game 4 of the World Series, which was a back and forth game, if you recall. I think the final score was 9-8 or something like that.
It was 7. It was 8-7.
Okay. The final score was.
I have this game as an honorable mention on my list, by the way, for best game.
So there you go. So it was the final score was 8-7. So 15 runs scored in the game. It was back and forth. The Dodgers would take the lead and Tampa Bay would come back. The Dodgers would take the lead again and Tampa Bay would come back. And then in the bottom of the 9th, with 2 outs and 2 strikes on a guy named Brett Phillips, who no one ever heard of, whose batting average, I think, in the series was 0 up until that point.
Well, I don't even know if he put it this way. He's the last man on the bench.
Right. This guy, when you're filling out your World Series roster and you're putting his name down, you're saying to yourself, I really hope we don't need to use this guy.
Yeah.
So he comes through with a hit, first of all. And then, as if that's not enough, that ties up the game. As if that's not enough, the Dodgers make 2 errors on the same play and somehow Tampa wins the game. Because, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the replay a million times. Randy Arozarena, he was a dead duck at home plate. He actually fell on his way to home plate, and he was a dead duck. All the catcher has to do is catch the ball, and he's tagged out. Now,
but the catcher thought he didn't realize that he had so much time, and he swung around to apply the tag, and the ball flew out of his glove, and then Arozarena scores.
Right. Now Tampa had already tied up the game before that, so the game was going to go into extra innings if Arozarena was tagged out. But you know what happened. He falls down, he gets up, he touches home plate, Tampa Bay wins. And after that game, like as soon as that game ended and Tampa won, that was the first time that I actually said to myself, you know, Tampa might actually win the World Series.
Yeah.
Of course,
but
I
just
was
goes
wrong.
Just goes to show how resilient the Dodgers were. You know, that's partly why they're my team of the year. You know, like they really, like I said, the Dodgers, all they could do was fail. Like every outcome in their way was a failure. And then they managed to find the one outcome, which was winning the World Series, which was a successful season for them.
I don't think you're going to be surprised by number 1. Number 1 is a college basketball game from February between Duke and North Carolina, which I actually almost forgot about this game until yesterday.
Yeah, me too. I only remembered about it when I started seeing the best of the year shows. I was like, oh my God, remember that game?
So let me just take you back to that game, because Duke was actually not playing well for, I guess, 90% of that game, if not 95% of that game. Duke had no business even being in that game. The game, North Carolina should have won that game easily. They had a comfortable lead at halftime. I think they had a comfortable lead well into the second half. And then somehow, I don't remember how, Duke comes back and they're within 2 points of tying the game with 4.4 seconds left in the game in regulation time. And Trey Jones is at the free throw line and he misses the free throw intentionally. He hits it off the rim. The rebound is completely erratic and somehow comes right back to him. He dribbles a couple of times. Remember, he only has like 4.4 seconds left. He dribbles a couple of times, throws up a prayer, and it goes in. And the game is tied, and it's going into overtime.
Right.
So, insane. Like, regardless of what happens in overtime, already insane.
Yeah.
Then the game goes into overtime, and actually North Carolina pulls ahead again. And then, yet again, with 6.6 seconds left in overtime, the game's now tied at 96 at this point, and Trey Jones is at the free throw line yet again. Right. And this time he misses a free throw, but it wasn't intentional. And Duke gets the rebound. Trey Jones somehow gets the ball back, throws up this prayer, which goes nowhere near the net. It just so happens that Wendell Moore is standing right below the basket. He catches the ball and puts it in, and they win with no time left on the clock.
A miss, a tap. Jones, tipped, yes! Wendell Moore puts it home for Duke.
It was a wild scene because they all tacked him and jumped on Wendell Moore. It was nutso.
It was completely crazy. Now, it wasn't really an important game. It wasn't during March Madness, and it wasn't, even during the ACC tournament.
No, but every Duke North Carolina game is an important game.
Right. And so it was very exciting. And I'm not even really doing it justice by the way I'm describing it. It was actually way more exciting than what I'm saying now.
It was good. That was a great pick, Josh. I mean, I love your picks. So I had that game on my honorable mentions. I also had the World Series Game 4 Brett Phillips hit as an honorable mention.
Okay.
The other one that I had, which was a crazy, crazy game. You can't say it was the best game or favorite, but I mean, it was something so ridiculous that took over the hockey world for a whole week, which was the famous E-Bug game. The emergency backup goalie.
I completely forgot about that.
The emergency backup goalie, David Ayers, who the Carolina Hurricanes had to pull out of the stands to play goal for the third period against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they actually won the game.
That's insane. I completely forgot about that.
It's just something that's just like a once in a lifetime thing, you know? And then so much of what made that game great was the reaction afterwards, right? How the Leafs got destroyed by the press unfairly, you know, because I mean, it's just something that happened, and all the crazy celebrations, you know, like the videos from the locker room of the Canes locker room, and this guy David Ayers, like, just what a moment for him. It was really great, you know, it was really great. But my number one game of the year goes with my Patrick Mahomes theme. Was a divisional playoff round on January 12th. So we're going back almost a full year. And that was the game where Houston was ahead. It was Kansas City versus the Houston Texans. Houston was ahead 21-0 after the first quarter. And everybody was flipping out that, oh my God, Houston's going to beat Kansas City. Like, this is it. Kansas City's not winning. And then next thing you know, that game was over. Like, Kansas City won the game 51-31. Not only did they come all the way back, the fourth quarter was completely useless because you already knew Kansas City was winning. You know, like, I remember texting you that game. I was like, this game's over. Like, this game was like, the comeback that they did was so unbelievable. And Mahomes threw 5 touchdowns.
It's 3rd and goal. Mahomes to Kelsey, and another touchdown for Kansas City. 3 touchdowns in 3 minutes and 24 seconds.
That was just like you said, like, they just had this knack for coming back because, like you said, the week later they beat Tennessee, and Tennessee looked like they also had them on the ropes, but Mahomes found a way. Then the week after, 2 weeks later in the Super Bowl, they beat San Francisco, and again, like you said, fourth quarter, you didn't know who was going to win, but Mahomes and Tyreek Hill hooked up for this huge touchdown, and Kansas City won the Super Bowl.
That's an excellent game. I obviously didn't forget about the game, but I didn't even put it into my list. But it should have been in my honor. It should have been in my honorable mentions.
It was nuts because it was like we were texting. We're like, I can't believe Houston's going to win this game. And next thing you knew, you know, sometimes when a comeback happens, it's like, okay, now it's 21-7. Now it's 21-14. Like, the comeback happens sort of slowly. This was like they came all the way back and then increased their lead and ended up winning by 20, right?
I know
like,
somehow Kansas City is able to score 14 points. Like, in the time you take to go to the kitchen and get a snack, the lead could have changed 7 times.
It's so true. So true. I love it. That's so true. Okay, so now we're on the last sports category for today.
Yes.
Which is our best play or favorite play of the year. This is hard, right? Because there's a lot of great plays, and I'm going to tell you like some of the ones that didn't make my list, but it was hard because when I started to think about best play, there was only one play that came into my mind. One in my mind that I could remember. Mm-hmm. But then as I started to research it, I realized, there was a lot of cool plays this year. For example, Mookie Betts in the World Series, like a couple of the catches he made, like 2 in 1 game. That was wild. I don't know if you saw on some of the countdowns on TSN or Sportsnet, the save that Carey Price makes against the Flyers, where
yes,
I remember watching it in real time. I can't believe
it was Lawton. It was Lawton who took the shot. It was
Lawton. Okay, he missed the net by so much on a wide open net. I was like, oh my God, wide open net, and he shot it over the glass? How is that even possible? But then in the super, super, super slow-mo replay, you see that Carey Price tipped the puck with the tip of his stick to deflect it over, which was a pretty crazy save. there's a play from just this past NFL season, which is the Arizona versus Buffalo. It was dubbed the Hail Murray.
Yeah.
You know, the Kyler Murray to DeAndre Hopkins Hail Mary, which
Yeah.
is a pretty crazy play and actually could be in the best game. The one play that I did have in my head was Eastern Conference Final, NBA Eastern Conference Final Game 1, Celtics Heat, and Jason Tatum. The Celtics were holding the ball for the last shot. Jason Tatum drives to the net, looks like he's going to dunk it for the victory, literally dunk it as time is expiring for the victory. But Bam Adebayo doesn't just block the shot, like he blocks a dunk,
Yeah.
which is like was the most unbelievable block you could see in your life. And if we're going specifically by the skill involved in the play, like the actual play that has nothing to do with the significance of the game. And I know this is weird, but I'm going to go to golf, Josh. I don't know if you saw on these plays of the year, this shot, this guy, his name is John Ram. It was in the practice round of the Masters, not even the real Masters, the practice round.
Yes, I saw this.
He skips the ball off the water like you skip a stone. You know,
Yes.
like when you throw a stone and you skip it off the top of the water. He skips the ball off the water onto the green, and then once it's on the green, the ball does this crazy curling trajectory and goes right into the hole, which that part had to be fluke. But the fact that he skipped a golf ball off the water is just absurd. So those are my honorable mentions. And my number one play of the year is something that you've already described in great detail, and that's the whole sequence of events that took up the 9th inning of Game 4 of the World Series. And the Brett Phillips hit, you know, it was 6-6 going in the 8th inning. Corey Seager got a bloop hit to put the Dodgers up 7-6. And then the bottom of the 9th, the Rays managed to get some guys on base. And like you said, Brett Phillips, last man on the bench, hits the ball into right field for a hit. The outfielders bobble it. They boot it. They pick it up. The tying run's already scored. Arozarena's trying to score. Ridiculous that he actually tried to score because he's out by a mile. He, like you said, he falls between third and home. But catcher doesn't realize how much time he has, and next thing you know, the ball goes flying behind the catcher, and Arozarena touches home, and the Rays win. It's really a crazy sequence of events that you could never even invent, you know, if you dreamed it up.
Jansen, that is into center field. Here comes Kiermaier. Phillips has tied the game. Arozarena coming around. Throw home. Now he stumbles, but the ball gets away. Tampa Bay wins it. Game 4 hero.
I love your choice for play of the year.
Nice.
And some of the honorable mentions that you had, I had the same ones. But I'm just going to mention a few that you didn't mention. But you may recall when we recorded this exact episode a year ago, I asked you about the save that Charlie Lindgren made against Carolina.
You did, yeah.
And the reason I mentioned it was because it wasn't on any of the highlight shows last year because it happened on New Year's Eve and all the highlight shows had already been recorded. But technically it happened in 2019. So it should have been included in the highlight shows this year, but it wasn't.
It got screwed because it was New Year's Eve game.
A few other crazy plays that happened this year. You remember, so when the Arizona Cardinals intercepted a pass by Russell Wilson, and
that was a crazy play. Buda Baker.
Yes, Buda Baker intercepts the pass, and then DK Metcalf chases him down, I think, 80 yards and actually tackles him before he scores the touchdown. So that was a crazy play.
DK Metcalf is a freak of nature physically.
He really is. So number 3 for me was your number 1, the Brett Phillips hit in the 9th inning.
Right.
Crazy play, but it's number 3 for me. Number 2, you also mentioned this in your honorable mentions. It was the Hail Murray. For the number 1 play of the year, of course, I'm biased. I'm going to pick the Duke North Carolina game, and there's 2 amazing plays in that game. I'm going to pick the one in regulation time because Duke was actually down by 2 at that point, and Trey Jones had to do this crazy shot off the rim of the net, and somehow
anytime you miss a free throw on purpose and somehow you still works out for you, like that's crazy.
It never happens. Apparently, he practices that in practice. But anyhow, I'm not going to rehash the entire play because I did a few minutes ago. But to me, that's the play of the year.
Got the miss. Jones, can he get a shot off? Yes! Jones knocks it down to tie the game.
Very good choices, Josh. I love them all. So actually, I made a separate category for the worst play of the year, Josh.
Okay.
And I know you agree with me on this, and it's not even a play, it's a decision. And that was Kevin Cash taking out Blake Snell in Game 6 of the World Series when the Rays were up 1-0.
I do agree with you. Yes.
Before we go into the pop culture segment,
Yes.
so I did have two little mini categories, and we don't have to talk a lot about them because they've been rehashed to death, but I just want to mention them because I think they deserve it. These are categories that could only exist in 2020. So like the athlete who sort of needs his own category is Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. Like we didn't mention his name, but I mean, he won the Super Bowl with the Chiefs in the beginning of 2020 and then decided he wasn't going to attend training camp for the new season. Instead, he was going to work on the front line here in Montreal, helping with, all those in need for suffering under COVID. So, like, congratulations to him. I mean, he's just an amazing story. And actually, I don't know if you don't even listen to ESPN Daily anymore, do you?
No, I don't.
They had a whole episode about him this week, which was amazing.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll listen to that one.
The most important sporting event that happened this year happened on March 11th. And that was when Rudy Gobert tested positive for COVID, because not only did all sports basically shut down after that, the whole world sort of shut down after that. We were paying attention to COVID-19 up until March 11th, but when the NBA canceled games, it became very real, and I think we've talked about this before.
So two things about that date.
Yeah.
First of all, it's interesting because now sports are back, and when you get a positive test, they just tell those people to go quarantine. They don't shut down the entire sport.
Right.
So it's interesting that in March they shut down the entire sport, and now they just continue playing.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I mean, we can get into that, but I mean, that's sort of what's going on in all our lives, in that we're all tired and frustrated from the situation. It's like we just want it to be over.
Now, the other thing I wanted to mention, there is a 30 for 30 podcast called March 11th, 2020.
Oh, wow.
It just came out about a week ago, or maybe even less. I haven't listened to it yet.
I'm going to listen to that.
Should be interesting.
All right. So the pop culture part of the episode, we're going to talk about songs, movies, and music. And actually, you wanted to talk about podcasts also, I think, right?
Yes, we're adding a new category.
Let's start with TV, Josh. It's the thing that I have the most of, and it's what we've talked about the most also, I think, more or less this year. No?
It was a banner year for television. I have to tell you, there are like 5 different shows that I watched this year that could easily be my favorite show of the year.
Oh, absolutely.
And I can only pick one, but if these 5 shows were spread out over 5 years, I'd pick all 5 of them.
What's amazing is for the last 10 years, the world of television has been catching up to movies in terms of the quality of what you watch. And maybe at one point, some people would consider them on par. But like TV is become just as important. And this is the year where TV surpassed movies, because obviously there was no movies in the theater, and TV was so good. So, anyways, I'm going to give you all my honorable mentions in no particular order. And I'm not going to talk about any of them. I'm just going to give them to you because it's too much. I have a huge list. Okay.
Go ahead.
So the Snowpiercer, which is on Netflix, The Morning Show, which is on, I believe, Apple TV. It's with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon. Defending Jacob, Little Voice, which is an Apple TV show. Hunters, or as I thought it was called Nazi Hunters, but anyways, I think the show's called Hunters. It's with Al Pacino. Away, which is a Netflix show. Love Life with Anna Kendrick, which I mentioned last time. Outer Banks, which is completely a teen show, but it was extremely entertaining. Cobra Kai, which I mentioned on this show before, that I love, and I believe the new season is coming out January 1 or 2, so that's exciting for all the Cobra Kai Karate Kid fans. The Clone Wars Season 7. This is the show that I mentioned before. I asked Matthew, did this come out in 2020? And he said, yes, it did. So that's an animated show on Disney+. The Mandalorian, also part of the Star Wars universe. The Undoing, which is an HBO show, and you can get it on Crave. It's with Hugh Grant and Nicole Kidman. We just watched it like this week. It's absolutely fantastic. Little Fires Everywhere. It's an Amazon Prime show with Reese Witherspoon. And The Crown, which I've mentioned often. There's 4 seasons. We watched them all. Season 4 came out this year. Is fantastic. It's the Princess Diana season. The actress who plays Princess Diana really stole the show. And then my number 1 show of the year, we've mentioned it the last 2-3 weeks, is The Queen's Gambit. I was thoroughly entertained, loved it, loved the characters, loved the actress who played the main character, loved all the supporting actors. I just think it was so well done and so entertaining. And I wish, like we said last time, when a show leaves you wanting more, that's a good sign, right? I mean, I was sad that it was over.
That's an excellent list.
Yeah. What do you got?
So here's my list, and I'll do what you did. I'll just mention my honorable mentions, and then I'll tell you which one is my favorite. So in no particular order. Now, again, remember, first of all, we make the rules because it's our own show, but some of these shows might be old, but I only watched them in 2020, so as far as I'm concerned, they can be on my list.
Sure.
So a Netflix show called Merry Happy Whatever, which I picked because I actually know one of the actresses on the show.
Wow.
The Goldbergs, because we talk about it all the time. This Is Us, a show that I really like. Modern Family, it was the last season for Modern Family. Schitt's Creek, it was the last season for Schitt's Creek as well. A show that you told me about on Netflix called Unorthodox.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Another show that you told me about on Netflix called Dirty John, the first season.
That one's good too.
Another show on Netflix that you told me about called Mindhunter.
Oh, man. Nice.
And now I'm into my top 3. And really, any one of these could have been number 1.
Mm-hmm.
So the honorable mentions are Better Call Saul, which you haven't watched yet and you need to watch.
Yeah.
And Ozark, which you have watched.
Oh, yeah. But I didn't love Ozark season 4. I liked it good, but yeah.
Well, I saw all 4 seasons in 2020.
Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah.
I didn't just see season 4. And so the number 1, my favorite, and part of the reason I'm picking this one is because it's only a 1-season show, is The Queen's Gambit.
Oh my God, we agree. That's so good.
So I kind of wanted to pick Ozark or Better Call Saul, but I know that I'll be able to maybe pick those in 2021 because I know they're coming back for more episodes.
They are, for sure.
Queen's Gambit, I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that, so that's part of the reason why I'm picking it as my favorite show of 2020.
I really thought you were going to pick Better Call Saul, but that's really cool. That's a great list. And now, like, movies, we were tying in TV and movies. Like, it was a lousy year for movies. When I looked up lists of, like, the best movies of 2020, I didn't know any of them. Like, honestly, I didn't know anything. I mean, obviously, I didn't see any movies in the theater this year, and I mean, we watched some movies on TV, on Netflix and stuff, but originals. But like, when I was making my list, there's literally nothing that, like, I wanted to keep my list blank. But if I had to pick one, I saw a great documentary on Robbie Robertson and the band called Once We're Brothers. And I think that's probably the best movie I saw this year.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I actually also saw a documentary about a rock band, the band called Teenage Head from Hamilton.
Right, you mentioned that, yeah.
But that isn't my favorite movie of the year. So it's funny, you say, like, we haven't been to the theater. I never really went to the theater that much, even before this pandemic.
Right.
I certainly didn't go to the theater this year. I watched, I think, 35 movies this year.
Oh my God.
Most of them are old movies. But there are actually 5 movies that I watched that I've never seen before. And actually, 4 of them are relatively new in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So, honorable mentions first is, you're going to laugh, but Casablanca.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people haven't seen Casablanca, but I mean, I have, but I mean.
So that's
Yeah.
in my honorable mentions. Another one is a movie that you told me about called One of Us. It's
What is that about?
It's that Netflix movie about the Orthodox Jews.
Oh yeah. Sure. Yeah, that's good. That's a good one.
Another Netflix movie, also a documentary called Icarus, about that reporter who was also a cyclist who wanted to see that if he took performance enhancing drugs, could he improve his time? And then
I have that bookmarked on my Netflix. I want to see that. Yeah.
by accident, he sort of discovers this Russian scandal.
Yeah, the reason why Russia's banned from the Olympics is because of this guy. He found out by accident.
Exactly.
It unraveled the whole scheme. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's cool.
And then yet another. Okay, my last honorable mention is The Green Book, which I think was nominated for an Oscar a couple of years ago.
Is that the guy who drives around another guy?
Yes.
I never saw it, but yeah.
Well, you're oversimplifying it, but yes.
Yeah.
So actually, my favorite movie that I saw in 2020 is a Spike Lee movie called Black Klansman.
Oh yeah, that looks so good actually.
It is really good. I really enjoyed it, and that's my movie of the year.
So what about songs, Josh? We always differ on songs in that we don't listen to the same music. Songs is one of those categories where I really try to make it current music. I try not to go back in time because obviously like I listen to a lot of old music, but I try to like make sure I pick usually like something that came out in that year. So, but 2020 was a weird year for me for music because I listened to Bruce Springsteen like 90% of the time. Honestly. I had the E Street radio on my satellite radio. I listened to it 24 hours a day, nonstop, concerts. All like I just couldn't get enough of it. Music became so important in 2020, being in lockdown, and I reconnected with all my Bruce music. And then Bruce gave us a great gift at the end of just a little while ago, which was a new album. And so my song of the year is off that album. That's the song Ghosts. And that's a song you watched him on Saturday Night Live, right?
I did, yeah.
So that was the first song that he sang on Saturday Night Live.
I hear the sound of your guitar.
By the way, I have to say that song, that was the first time I ever heard it when he played it on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of other Bruce Springsteen songs.
Well, yeah, it does. I mean, that's
not a bad thing. I'm just saying.
No, that's not a bad thing. And actually, not that song is not one of them that I'm about to tell you, but there are songs on this album that he wrote in like 1972 and that he never recorded, and then he redid them and they recorded them on this album. So there's some songs on there that are actually old songs, and the lyrics are his style of writing. You can kind of tell because they're these really rambly, like a lot of words, like he always says, like a lot of words. But yeah, it does sound like a lot of. I mean, that's a good thing, right? Like Ghost is a great song because it's a real rockin' song, and he hasn't really had his rock voice in a while,
So this category is actually, I think, the easiest category for me every year because what I do anytime I add a new song to my phone, I put it in a playlist, and basically the playlist is that year. So I have a playlist for every year for the last 10 years.
Right.
And so I can easily just go back and look at whatever year I want. And obviously I'm looking at the current year, and I look at all the songs that I discovered this year. There's 23 songs that I discovered, well, more, but 23 songs that I like.
Yeah.
That I discovered this year. And so my favorite song of the year, this song I have to tell you, I'm going to guess that you've never heard of it, as per usual.
Uh-huh.
And this is one of those songs, and a song like this doesn't come along very often, where even though I have it on my phone and I can listen to it anytime I want, when it comes on the radio, if I'm in the car or even at home, I will turn up the radio and blast it because I love it so much.
And that is?
And that is, the song is called Lame, and it's by a Toronto band called The Beaches.
You're so dumb. Got a new guitar, now you think you're famous, but you're fun.
The Beaches, by the way, they are an all-female band, 4 women.
Mm.
And I like a bunch of their songs. They've been around for a few years. This is not their first album.
Right.
But I really do love this song. My only, I don't know if complaint is the right word. I just wish the song was longer. It's such a short song that I have to listen to it twice every time because it's too short.
Awesome. Oh, that's awesome. It's great that you're going to let our listeners discover some new music. Good. So you wanted to add a category for podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, I figure, listen, we're doing a podcast and it's 2020 now. So if we're going to do a best of 2020, we listen to a lot of podcasts, both of us. You give me recommendations. I give you recommendations.
I subscribe to like at least 20.
Right. So we should say what our favorite podcast of the year was.
So what was it?
Well, I mean, I could say this one, but I'm not going to do that. So there are a bunch of good ones. but I can only pick one. So if I can only pick one, I'm going to pick The Edge, which is about the Houston Astros scandal.
It was really good. It was really good.
So that's the one I'm going to pick.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was really good. That's a good pick. I mean, honestly, like we talked about it in detail a few episodes ago, but it's really, really well done, and you really learn a lot about that whole cheating and cheating in baseball in general.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah. So I kind of had two to this, like I came down to two, but I picked the one that I think I got the most out of this year. And that was Endless Thread. I don't think you subscribe to Endless Thread.
I don't think you've ever told me about it.
No, I'm sure I have. No?
I don't recognize the name.
Okay. Well, it's hosted by Ben Brock Johnson and Amory Silverson. And basically, it's a podcast about Reddit. So they find topics that are trending on Reddit and they podcast about it.
Interesting.
But it's sort of like the official Reddit podcast. So the topics can vary wildly from episode to episode. It's like random stuff, you know, and sometimes they're incredibly interesting. Mm-hmm. I discovered this because a friend asked me, have I heard about this thing about glitter? Like apparently there's this story about glitter. And then I read up about it, and then there's a whole podcast about it on Endless Thread. And then that's how I found the podcast. So you know this thing about glitter? Apparently, like there's like only 2 or 3 companies in all of the United States that make glitter.
Okay.
And apparently, like 75% of all the glitter manufactured in the whole country is sold to one industry.
It's got to be like cheerleading or dancing or something.
No, and the glitter manufacturers do not want to say what the industry is. So
okay.
It's apparently some kind of secret. So the podcast sort of explores like what are the potential industries that all the glitter is going into. It's really quite amazing. Anyways, you should check it out.
The Skip and Josh podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. If you listen to the show through Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. To interact with the show, send an email to skipandjoshshow@gmail.com. Follow the show on Twitter @skipandjosh, and go to facebook.com/skipandjosh to like the show page. To see links mentioned on today's episode, go to skipandjosh.com. And now for some final thoughts from the guys.
I just want to give kudos to there's like 6-7 NBA games today, Josh, Christmas Day.
Oh, that's right. I completely forgot about that.
And I want to give props to the NBA schedule maker as I don't know if a lot of our fans know, but Josh has a long history of schedule making for the Canadian Football League.
Yes.
And the schedule maker in the NBA is a freaking genius. I don't know if you saw, like the 2 games on opening night, like was the Golden State Warriors versus the Brooklyn Nets.
I saw
and
that,
you say,
yeah.
well, what's so good about that?
Well, because Kevin Durant against his old team.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And then the Lakers versus the Clippers. Those are the first 2 games of opening night. Like the schedule maker, he's like he understands the pulse of the league and also like sort of like what's trending with the fans, and they make the schedule accordingly. It was brilliant.
I mean, they had to do something like that because they wanted people to get excited and interested in watching.
Absolutely. It was just brilliant. It's a brilliant move, and the other leagues should learn from them, honestly. So, and maybe we'll see. We're going to have the all-Canadian division, Josh, in the NHL. It's going to be awesome, no?
I don't mind that. I don't mind that it's an all-Canadian division. That's not the thing that I mind. What I mind is you're playing the same teams over and over and over again. Like Montreal's going to play Toronto 10 times, I think, this year.
No, that Canadian division is going to be really tough. Honestly, it's. But it is what it is. But like, does that mean you're going to have to resubscribe to some of your sports channels to watch these games? Or
I won't really have to. I'll tell you why. Because for starters, even if I resubscribe to all the sports channels, I still don't get the Canadians games because they're blacked out in Toronto.
Right. So you may as well just watch what you get on Hockey Night in Canada, right?
Right, which I get CBC as part of my basic package.
Yeah, well, everybody gets CBC. It's like...
So I don't need to sign up for sports channels to get that.
All right, well, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. The other thing is, so not only are you only going to play teams in your own division, in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, you're still only playing teams in your own division. You don't play another team until the semifinals.
But hockey was good like that. Remember like the Adams and the Patrick division? No, those were good playoffs.
Oh, yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just, it just you get tired of seeing the same teams over and over and over again.
Look, it's not balanced. It's some people will say maybe it's not as fair, but given the circumstances, it's better than it's pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah. It's fine. I'm not complaining.
Merry Christmas to all our listeners who celebrate, and Happy New Year, Josh, to you. If we're not going to do an episode. This is definitely going to be our last recording in 2020.
For sure, yes.
Let's all cross our fingers and our toes and wish for a good 2021.
Let's do that. I echo those comments.
All right. Happy New Year again, and I'll talk to you next time.
Happy New Year.